Jocelyn, his administrative assistant, ushered into the office Doug Andy Daniels, senior vice president of streaming at Ascendant, and Riposte Reynolds, son of actress Jennifer Planter and her musician husband Mike Reynolds, frontman of the British rock band Hot Rocks. You could always recognize a baby by its name. It didn't matter what planet, fruit, or vegetable they were named after. A celebrity could always count on being an attention-hungry jerk when it came time to pick a name for their child. Riposte? Really? Looking a lot like his father, skinny, 140 pounds, with red hair and a beak on his nose, Riposte Reynolds, unfortunately for him, got his father's looks and his mother's brains. Riposte was that Nepo kid. As a favor to Riposte's mother, who had a deal with Ascendant made before Doug became CEO, Doug agreed to listen to her son's offer to produce a television series for the Ascendant Plus streaming service. The streaming service's current program consisted of a reboot of a 50-year-old science fiction series and a half-dozen series supplied by Tyler Sherman's production factory. After getting comfortable and making sure everyone was seated and drinking coffee, Jocelyn walked out of Doug's office to her own desk and her duties as Doug's gatekeeper. Riposte glanced at Jocelyn as she walked away and was about to make a remark, but saw the look on Doug's face as he watched him stare at Jocelyn. Riposte prudently closed his mouth. While sexist and boorish behavior was still prevalent in Hollywood, the broom that had swept out scum like Harvey Weinstein was still being wielded by those who wanted to make the men and some women in the industry better. Bringing order to Ascendant after his predecessor was fired for sexual harassment was Doug's assignment from the board of directors. If Riposte had made a remark about Jocelyn, the meeting would have ended immediately. Fortunately, even a dim bulb like Riposte Reynolds was able to keep his comments to himself these days. Jennifer Planter, by all accounts, left acting to focus on her website, Splooge. The site was a mixture of newfangled self-help and overpriced merchandise. The most famous was a $1,200 rejuvenation kit that, analysis showed, consisted mostly of a mixture of bleach and hemorrhoid ointment. Jennifer's daughter, Mango Reynolds, had taken the plunge into acting with little success. Her success was due primarily to her willingness, even impatience, to appear nude in every role offered, whether it was in the script or not. And now her son was trying to utilize his mother's contacts in the industry to launch his artistic career. So, Riposte, your mom says you have an idea you want to pitch to us. Something about a new take on the cop series? Yeah, that's right. And all my buddies call me either Rip or Ripper. Doug tried not to lash out at the arrogant little shit. He knew that the only buddy this self-righteous jerk had was his mother's limo driver. Andy wasn't as successful at hiding his disdain, but thankfully Ripper let it pass his ears. We're always looking for a fresh take on cop shows. Along with soccer, they are still our most watched programs. Tell us what you've got, Doug said. Riposte smiled a huge smile. You're going to shit your pants when I tell you. It's fucking awesome. Doug made a sloping gesture with his right hand, signaling Riposte to continue. The action takes place in a big city. It doesn't matter what city, because you guys probably want to shoot in Toronto anyway, right? The hero is a badass police detective. This guy doesn't take anyone's shit. He's a real cop who blows heads off, kicks ass, shoots first, and asks questions later. That's why he's always in trouble with the chief. When Riposte paused to take a sip of coffee, Doug inwardly groaned. He'd just described the basic storyline of every cop show ever filmed. But this guy's different. And here's the thing. He's a bit of a retard. He's got Down syndrome. The title of the show is Officer Down, only Down is spelled with an E on the end. Riposte leaned back in his chair contentedly, and with a wide grin on his face, shifted his gaze from Doug to Andy, expecting their enthusiastic approval. But instead they looked at each other with undisguised horror. Riposte mistook their wide-open eyes for interest and continued his presentation. Remember that old TV show that had this guy named Corky? Imagine this guy. Here Riposte stood up and stretched his arms out in front of him as if grabbing an imaginary gun, kicking down a door. He simulated kicking down a door and stretched an imaginary gun out in front of him, and yelling like a retard, "Freeze, fathermucker!" It'll be hilarious. We might even be able to get him a cop partner to be his service dog. Doug thought to himself, oh my God, this just keeps getting worse and worse. This was the most disgusting, most deplorable idea for a TV show in history. And he had once been offered a reboot of the 1980s TV series The Facts of Life, but in a brothel in Nevada, with Mrs. Garrett as the madam. "For God's sake, please tell me you didn't offer this to someone else," Doug asked. He tried to hide his sense of disgust, and he barely succeeded. "No, you're the first. Mom told me not to give it to anyone but you." "I see," Doug said. He made a mental note to talk to Jennifer Planter about her son, and whether she, or more likely the nanny, had noticed any disturbing signs related to riposte, such as mysterious fires or missing neighborhood pets. "We'll have to think about it," Andy said. "Let's see how it fits into our schedule." He rose to his feet, followed immediately by Doug. Riposte rose more slowly. He thought there would be more discussion about production or finances, maybe even about moving to mass production without having to shoot the pilot. Andy gently took Riposte by the elbow and walked him to the door. "I promise we'll get back to you in a day or two about the next steps." Doug and Andy knew that the only step for this pitch would be to take it to the dumpster. After the door closed, Doug and Andy looked at each other and broke into synchronized laughter. Fucking naughty kids. Pulling into the garage of his Malibu Beach home, Doug was silent for a moment, turning off the ignition. He was afraid to go into his house. The house he had remodeled to his wife's specifications. The house they were to live in for the rest of their lives. The house where she was having fun with their contractor. Doug Showalter met Sharon Davis on the set of the television miniseries Millionaire Killer. Sharon wrote the script, which was approved by one of the 3 major television networks. It was the story of a Dallas oil man arrested for the murder of his wife's lover and her daughter from a previous marriage. When the events actually happened, the tabloids were in a frenzy. The story had everything imaginable: a popular oil man, his gold-digging ex-wife, her boyfriend, who played college soccer at Texas A&M. The oil man's lawyer, Harrison Highway Lee, was a fast-talking, hip, gun-toting lawyer, and the story was told from his point of view. Highway Lee was the kind of character that only Hollywood could create. He was the only one who was real. He wore cowboy boots, a Stetson, and a fringed leather suit, and every phrase uttered during the trial was replayed by every TV station ad nauseum. The miniseries was to go gold. Doug was hired as the second director of the miniseries. He had only one job as the main director at the time, but he had a good reputation as a second director who would go on location, get the cast and crew to comply, and bring back material that was often better than what the director had gotten on tape. That's exactly what happened on the set of Millionaire. The producers were not at all happy with what they saw on film and felt that what Doug did on set as second director was much better. So the director was fired, and Doug was promoted to director, on a big-budget miniseries that was over budget and behind schedule. Doug worked closely with the writer to understand what her vision for the movie was. The previous director was not interested in her input, and focused on bringing that vision to life. The Millionaire Killer was eventually filmed on time and only slightly over budget, despite reshoots required due to the shoddy work of the first director. The miniseries became a ratings blockbuster. That same year, it conquered the Emmys, winning awards for Sharon Davis for original screenplay, Reggie Broom for his role as millionaire killer G. Davis Conrad, and Roy Barfield for his role as attorney Harry Highway Lee. Doug Showalter also won an award for directing, but by then Doug and Sharon were already deeply in love and thinking of getting married. It all started with a flirtation on the set, which gradually grew into serious love. They were both in their early 20s, and although they were already in a relationship, neither of them had ever experienced such feelings. They were married in a small ceremony in Sharon's hometown of Plano, Texas. Married life worked out well for Doug and Sharon. Sharon continued to write scripts for television series. She became executive producer and showrunner of Highway to Hell, a series based on the heavily fictionalized exploits of Highway Lee. By the time the series' 5-year season ended, Sharon had 2 sons and decided to retire. She continued to write scripts for the TV shows she enjoyed watching, but thanks to her husband's meteoric rise, she didn't have to work unless she wanted to. Thanks to the spectacular success of Millionaire, Doug Showalter became an in-demand director. His first directing job after receiving an Emmy was the realization of a script by famous playwright Norman Stein. The script was a slapstick comedy about two middle-aged divorced men who are forced to share a cabin on a hijacked cruise ship and held for ransom in the middle of the Caribbean. The movie is a romantic comedy in which even the bad guys end up winning in the end. The movie starred Hollywood legends John Mellon and William Mathias. John and William were not only close friends in real life, but over the years they made half a dozen movies together, including several that are considered classics. Doug delivered the movie on time and on a smaller budget, and it became a huge success. Although the movie didn't win any awards, it enhanced Doug's reputation. He was offered big-budget productions, but he decided to start his own production company. He wanted to work for himself on projects he was passionate about, not just get a paycheck. It would also give Sharon the opportunity to find books or plays that interested her and develop them. Doug's production company, Shadow Showtime, in honor of Sharon and Doug and as a play on their last names, soon began with an office on the lot at Ascendant Studios. Over the next few years, they produced several movies and a dozen television series. The boys were growing up and getting better, and Doug had time to attend their games and be an active father. Doug and Sharon still loved each other and had quite a satisfying sex life. They were adventurous, sometimes a little kinky, but above all, they were monogamous with each other. That's why Doug was completely shocked to learn that Sharon was sleeping with his contractor. The boys grew up and moved away from home, Brian to Stanford and Daniel to Annapolis. And Doug and Sharon decided it was time to wind down their production company. They had more than enough money. The wealth they had accumulated was generational wealth. They had bought a house in Malibu from a retired rock singer who wanted to return to the UK because he was homesick, although Doug thought rumors of a pregnant 18-year-old high school senior might have something to do with the rocker's sudden longing for Brighton. While they liked the location of the house and its interior finishes, there was nothing sophisticated about the previous owner's taste. He'd managed to be both garish and trashy at the same time, spending a lot of money on it. Doug and Sharon turned to an architect and interior designer to completely remodel their seaside estate. Bobby Cornwell had a good reputation in Southern California. Whatever your vision, he could bring it to life, and over the next few months, he did just that. Sharon and Doug continued to live at their estate in Holmby Hills, with only occasional visits to Malibu to check on Bobby's progress. During this time, Doug made it clear that he was interested in selling Shadow Showtime productions and received a lot of interest from several studios. Chief among them was Ascendant Entertainment, which housed SSP's production offices. The board of directors made Doug an interesting offer that he had not yet talked to Sharon about. They wanted to buy SSP, but they also wanted Doug to run the studio. That is, president of Ascendant Studios. Doug got that offer in the morning. In the afternoon, he got a call on his cell phone. "Hello, Mr. Showalter. This is Kevin Brewster. I'm the electrical subcontractor on your house in Malibu." He phrased each sentence as a question, as if Doug could remodel several houses. "Yes, Kevin, I remember you. How are you?" "Mr. Showalter, I hate to call, but you should know what's going on here." That piqued Doug's interest. "What do you mean, Kevin? Some kind of rebuilding problem? Shouldn't you be talking to Bobby?" Doug heard a heavy sigh in the receiver. "That's the problem, Mr. Showalter. It's Bobby and Mrs. Showalter. They're having sex in here. If you know about it, just forget I called. But if you don't know about it, I thought you should." Doug clutched the phone receiver so tightly his palm ached. "What exactly are they doing, Kevin?" "Mrs. Showalter comes in just about every day. Bobby takes her to where the master bedroom will be for guests. That room is already finished and the carpet is laid. He has sex with her very loudly so everyone can hear. He makes her talk about how big he is and how much she likes it when he—" Doug closed his eyes and took a deep breath. "Is she there yet?" "No, sir. She just left." "Bobby, I want you to do me a favor," Doug said. "Yeah, I'll do whatever you say. It's wrong what he's doing. Don't say anything to Bobby or anyone else at the construction site. I'll figure out the best thing to do myself." That's what Doug did. It wasn't easy, but that night he managed to act like everything was okay. He praised the dinner Sharon had prepared and then retired to his office on the pretense of reading some scripts that had come into his hands. When he reached the bedroom, Sharon was already asleep. Standing over the bed, he barely restrained himself from grabbing a pillow and smothering her in her sleep. How many times had he gone down on her after she'd had fun with that asshole all day? He was shaking with rage. The next morning, Doug met with Carl McInnes, Ascendant's head of security. Carl had retired from the FBI as executive assistant to the director of intelligence. Doug explained what was going on and what he needed. Private investigator is the easiest. I've got half a dozen names of guys in my phone who are now doing private investigations and can easily gather information and evidence. But what are we going to do about this asshole contractor? I don't want to have anything to do with getting him off the board permanently, but I'll have no trouble making his life uncomfortable. Doug left Carl's office with the names of several private investigators and ideas of revenge. One thing Doug had almost forgotten. Bobby's payment was due the following week. Doug had paid him 25% at the beginning of the job and another 25% at mid-term. It was due by the end of next week, and as far as Doug was concerned, Bobby could hold out one hand while he fiddled with the other and see which one filled up first. Doug continued to avoid sex with his wife. She began to worry about the lack of affection towards her. He explained that he had a lot on his mind with the sale of their manufacturing company. She accepted his explanation but could not hide her concern. As a result, she began to act restless and nervous. Doug's private investigator placed the recordings on a cloud server and gave Doug an access code to listen to them. In doing so, the private investigator refused to post photos or videos on the cloud for Doug. He explained that once you see something, you can never not see it again. Eventually, he would give Doug access, but for now it was only audio recordings. Doug decided that would be best. On Friday, when Doug was supposed to get his check, Doug called Bobby on his cell phone. "Hey, Doug, what's up, buddy?" Doug heard the laughter in Bobby's voice and a muffled sound in the receiver. "I know I have a check due today, but I can't get away from the office. I was hoping you could stop by and pick it up." "Sure, no problem, buddy. It's the least I can do for you, you know what I mean? How about one?" Doug caught the laughter and slight mocking notes in Bobby's voice. "An hour would be just fine. I appreciate what you're doing, Bobby." "Hey, anything to help out my favorite Hollywood couple." Doug slammed the phone down in anger. Doug didn't realize at that moment that Sharon had been with Bobby during the phone call. She was having sex with him while Bobby was talking to her husband. While he waited for Bobby, Doug suspended his administrative assistant. A security camera showed the entrance to the office, so Doug was aware of Bobby's arrival. There were cameras inside the office, too, but they only recorded video and couldn't record sound. Bobby had been to the offices of Shadow Showtime Productions before, so he knew where Doug's office was. Bobby stepped into Doug's office, extended his hand, and with a smile on his face asked, "What's up, Doug?" Doug ignored Bobby's hand. "Sit down, you piece of shit." "So you found out," Bobby said mockingly. "Well, that was a nice girl. Just give me my check and I'll be on my way. Keep your bitch on a leash and stay out of my way, and my guys will be done as soon as we can." "Go fuck yourself. I ain't paying you shit." Bobby looked at Doug with a grin. "Hey, kid, you owe me money and you're going to pay me what you owe me. You want everyone to know I was dealing with your old lady? That you're a scumbag?" Doug shrugged and looked at his watch. "She's being served with divorce papers right now. You can keep her. I don't need her." "What do I want with a cheating whore? No, dude. She's your problem. But if you don't give me my money, you and I are going to have a problem." "Fuck you." Bobby jumped to his feet. "You think I'm messing around here? I've got paychecks to pay and vendors to pay. Give me my fucking money." "Fuck you," Doug repeated, laughing. "I'll kick your ass and then I'll come back to your house and fuck your whore wife in your bed." Bobby was furious. He always had a knack for intimidating people into doing his bidding. He couldn't believe this asshole was sitting there laughing at him. If he didn't get paid, he was screwed. He was gambling with the company's accounts, and he needed to get this payment to cover the other cases he was doing, or he was done, literally, because of who he owed money to. Bobby walked around Doug's desk and raised his fist, bringing it down on Doug's right cheek. Doug jerked back in pain as he reached for it. The 15.5-inch tall Emmy statuette is made of copper, silver, nickel, and gold. The award weighs 6 pounds 12.5 ounces. It has a round base with a diameter of 7.5 inches. The award, which usually stood on Doug's desk, was unique from any other Emmy Award ever given because it read, "For outstanding directing in a limited or anthology series or movie to Douglas Showalter for The Millionaire Killer." After getting punched in the face by Bobby, Doug grabbed his Emmy and brought it down on the top of Bobby's skull with all his might. Bobby threw a look at Doug as if to say, "What the hell, man?" then collapsed to the ground. Doug called his lawyer first. The next call was to Carl McInnes. The third call was to 911. Shortly after calling the police, Doug's cell phone rang. Sharon. He pressed the disconnect button. Doug poured himself a glass of TX bourbon and went out on the patio overlooking the Pacific Ocean. He looked out over the water, watching the sun set. It was a gorgeous sunset, one of the reasons they bought this house. Doug turned to his left toward the outdoor dining table and was surprised to find a visitor sitting there. "Sharon, what are you doing here?" To say Doug was shocked to see his ex-wife is a vast understatement. "Hi, Doug. Surprised?" "Of course surprised. It's been 2 years since we last spoke." "I know, Doug. I've been avoiding you all this time. I was too ashamed and embarrassed to look you in the eye." "Why now? Why after 2 years are you showing up in my life again? 2 years, Sharon. 2 fucking years." "I know, baby. I know I'm a monster on so many levels, but just because I've stayed away from you doesn't mean I haven't kept an eye on your life. I think we need to talk. You need to finish so you can move on with your life. To finally leave me in the rearview mirror once and for all." "Like that's going to happen?" Doug said bitterly. "My whole life was turned upside down when I found out about your affair. How could you, Sharon? How could you? And then just walk away and cut off all communication with me? I thought you loved me." "Oh, baby, don't ever think I don't love you. The best thing that happened to me in my life was marrying you. The worst was letting that snake Bobby Cornwell seduce me." Sharon looked out at the ocean and watched the sun sink toward the Pacific. The sunset at this house was gorgeous. It was why they had bought it, and she had never had the chance to spend a single night here. Her betrayal had ruined everything. "He seduced me, but I let it happen. Any reasons and excuses I give are bullshit. I made a commitment to you, and I didn't keep it. When you served me with divorce papers, I was devastated. I was wrong to have an affair. Nothing justifies what I did. I cheated and betrayed you, broke our vows, but I thought we were strong enough to get through anything. And you threw me away? Throw me away like garbage? It broke me. And then, when you got arrested..." Doug shrugged. "I had cameras all over the office. I knew the video would show him hitting me first and me defending myself. Did I try to kill him? Probably. But I wouldn't have lost sleep if I had tried. What happened to him is even better in my opinion. He is in long-term care and can't go to the bathroom by himself. I went in to see him one day. He immediately realized who I was. I've never seen such a hateful look as the one he gave me." "Oh, baby, why did you do that? He was a lowlife. You could have gone to jail. He wasn't worth it. I wasn't worth it." Doug looked at his ex-wife for a moment before he spoke. "What was I supposed to do? Not only did you have sex with him, but you publicly humiliated me along with the workers. The things you said and did, the things you shouted out to be heard. How could I accept that and keep my self-respect? But to walk away and refuse to see me or talk to me, to cut me out of your life? I couldn't believe how cruel you were to me." Sharon nodded her head sadly. "I knew you would eventually calm down and overcome your anger. I knew you would try to make up and give me another chance. But I also knew you'd be miserable if you tried. It would ruin you. No, our marriage was over and I ruined it. That's why I left and cut off all contact. I told my lawyer to get a divorce as soon as possible. I wanted to disappear from your life and give you the freedom to start over. Maybe I did the wrong thing. Maybe I should have talked to you. I thought you were too angry with me to want to listen. I've made so many bad decisions over the years." "So why are you here now?" "Part of it is what I said a moment ago. To let you know it's over. So you can yell and swear at me. You can hit me if it makes you feel better." Doug sighed. "No, I don't need closure." Your note gave me everything I needed. I didn't know if you read it. Part of me thought you'd tear it up and throw it away. Doug pulled his wallet out of his back pocket, extracted some sort of object from there, and unfolded it. It was 2 pieces of paper stapled together. They were frayed and wrinkled, as if they had been unfolded for reading many times. I read your note at least once a week, he said, and some weeks even more often. Can you read it to me? Asked Sharon quietly. Doug shrugged his shoulders. If you want to. I'm not sure why you want to hear it, though. Please, Sharon said, speaking again so quietly that Doug barely heard her. Doug began to read, My dear husband, words cannot express how sorry I am for ruining our marriage. I was a weak, a foolish woman who allowed herself to be flattered and seduced by a young man. They say there's no fool sillier than an old fool, and it's pure truth. 25 years ago, I stood before you, my family and God, and swore an oath. To be your wife, to love you, to comfort you, to cherish you, to forsake all others, and be faithful to you as long as we both shall live. I have failed you, failed myself, and failed our sons. I ask nothing of you in a divorce. A home is years away, our shadow. Showtime is yours. I don't want any alimony. I want nothing but your freedom. You are released from your vows. I pray that our sons will forgive me. I pray that my God will forgive me. But most of all, my sweet, beautiful husband, I pray that you forgive me. Your loving, unfaithful wife, Sharon. Doug's voice began to tremble as he finished. I forgive you, Sharon. I forgave you a long time ago. Sharon smiled at Doug. Thank you, baby. I know we can't be together, but I'll always love you. Doug cleared his throat and picked up his whiskey glass. I'm going to get some more whiskey. He shoved the papers into the cigar ashtray so they wouldn't be blown around by the coastal breeze. Does my father still send you a bottle of TX? Every Christmas, Doug said, opening the sliding door to the house. He poured himself a couple fingers of bourbon and stepped outside, out onto the empty deck. He walked to the end of the deck to see if Sharon was walking on the sand, but she was nowhere to be seen. She had disappeared from his life again, just as she had since the divorce. Doug sat back in his chair and took a sip of bourbon before picking up some papers from the table. On the first page was a copy of Sharon's note. He had other copies in his office and on his nightstand. Attached to Sharon's note was the second page, a newspaper clipping. The clipping had been made the day after her note. He had read this clipping so many times that he had memorized it by heart. Emmy Award-winning writer Sharon Showalter has died at the age of 46. The body of Sharon Showalter, Emmy Award-winning writer of the miniseries. The millionaire killer was found in the front seat of her car, parked outside the Century City apartment complex where she lived. The cause of death appeared to be a self-inflicted gunshot wound to the head. Showalter was co-owner of Shadow Showtime Productions with her ex-husband, award-winning filmmaker Douglas Showalter. The Showalters recently divorced amidst divorce rumors on Mrs. Showalter's part. Police say there is no sign of a struggle and the public is in no danger. Police say a note was found, but its contents are private and will not be released to the public. Funeral arrangements have not yet been finalized. Doug folded the papers and carefully placed them back in his wallet. He took another sip of bourbon and looked out at the ocean, where the last rays of the setting sun were reflecting off the Pacific Ocean.